Right. Greetings, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up? Yes? All right, right on. Welcome to the MTA's virtual forum on full service community schools. My name is Ricardo Rosa. I direct the MTA's Training and Professional Learning Division. And I'm just going to say a few words in two different languages for folks who are joining us and do not speak English. Okay? Just a second. So in Spanish, si precisa servicio de interpretación, presiona el globo. Okay? Si precisa servicio de interpretación, presiona el globo. And in Cape Verdean Creole, si bumesti servicio de interpretação, carrega num globo que deve estar tapar-se na bu computador, okay? Muito obrigado. I want to begin, first of all, by thanking some people. Sarah Ibanez and Allison Santana have held down the logistical end of this event and are behind the scenes tonight working their magic. Dr. Rachel Monares and Melissa Verdier have taken the time, despite their hectic schedules, to moderate. So thank you immensely. I want to also thank a special group of people who have come together to think deeply about the MTA's work on community schools and their insistence on keeping this work community-based and about building power from below. Vishaka Agarwal, Ariana Foster, Jennifer DeBarros, Calvin Feliciano, Noah Berger, and Courtney Dewinski. Thank you immensely. And I also want to thank our sibling union and organizational collaborators of this event, the Boston Teachers Union, who have done great work in advancing community schools in Boston under the leadership of Jessica Tang and continue to do great work. The AFT, the Massachusetts Educational Justice Alliance, Citizens for Public Schools, and the United Way. This evening's forum aims to increase our knowledge and inspire community-based action dialogues and dialogues in our local unions. It's open to all MTA members and communities throughout the state. One core tenet of the MTA's full-service community schools work is that the voices of those most impacted in our communities and the educators on the front lines must be centered in the work to build community schools. We also do this work with the understanding that the strongest community schools in the country are places where unions have been strong and have worked with grassroots community-based groups to bargain for the common good. Please, throughout tonight's event, I want you to post questions on the chat for Dr. Noguera. Our moderators will sort through them and pose them in the Q&A later on tonight. Towards the end of the forum, we will provide information about the formation of a book club. We're going to have book club dialogues throughout the state on a book that's available for free titled The Community Schools Revolution. Please be sure to stay for that information and for a evaluation at the end of this program. I'm now going to turn it over to Max Page, who is the president of the 117,000 member Massachusetts Teachers Association. Max is a longtime public education activist who believes that the quality of life in our communities depends on having public schools and colleges that meet the needs of every student and family. Max is on leave from UMass Amherst, where he's a professor of architecture since 2001. Max, are you on?
I'm here, Ricardo.
Right.
Can
Take it
you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. I am, as you can see outside, I am in Fall River, where there's going to be a great rally and a school committee visit by hundreds of our Fall River Education Association members. But I'm glad to jump onto this, as they're very related issues. And I just want to say first how proud I am to be the head of a union that would hire and recruit someone like Ricardo Rosa, who is leading this effort on community schools, and it leads all of our training and professional learning events and workshops and activist trainings. So let me be very brief and just say that one of the things I'm also proudest of about this union, the Mass Teachers Association, is that we insist as a basic part of our work that what happens outside of schools, that is the health and welfare and prosperity of our families, the students and their families, is essential to what happens inside of schools and the ability of students to learn and take full advantage of the opportunities. And the community schools model brings those two together and says that we as a school are going to care for our young people and their families, and that we're going to use the most trusted institution, our public schools, to bridge that gap. And I just feel like it's just so important that what we have done, we're fighting right now. Question two, we're going to end the punitive high stakes testing regime that has been sapping the life out of learning in our classrooms. But at the same time, we have also fought for more funding for schools like in Worcester and in Fall River, where I am right now. We've fought for paid family medical leave for every worker, except for municipal workers. We're going to win that now. Living wages for all employees, that is the $11 minimum wage, then the $15 minimum wage. We're going to push for $20, as well as the education workers in our schools, our education support professionals. We've won the Fair Share Amendment to bring $2 billion into our public schools, that is now, and to our transportation systems. That's helping bring universal meals into our public schools, free community colleges, and free regional buses, and a better MBTA, and repaired roads and bridges. This is essential to our work, and I'm so proud to have Dr. Noguera join us on Ricardo's invitation to join in this conversation, because to ignore the inequality in our society and the deep poverty that has been imposed upon our communities, so often communities of color, is we have to address that. There's no way to have the public schools or public colleges or universities succeed as we want them to for everyone unless we address that. There's just no other way. And the community schools effort that Ricardo is leading is one crucial way we do that. We provide the democratic space of the public school as a place where we can address the inequalities and provide the services and address the needs of all students and their families. So glad to have this event, and so glad to be on with you briefly. I will have to drop off in a bit to head to this rally, but I'm really glad to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Appreciate it. And now we turn it over to Deb McCarthy, who is the Vice President of the MTA. Deb McCarthy is a public education activist who has long worked to strengthen alliances that build strong communities. She has taught in the Hull Public Schools for 25 years. Deb, are you on?
I'm here. Thank you, Ricardo. I'm literally going to be short and sweet. I want to begin by asking that you all make sure to vote yes on 2 before November 5th so that we can eliminate the high stakes of a racist testing regime that has turned our schools into a testing warehouse. It is an absolute honor to be sitting here 2 weeks before we dismantle the high stakes of this testing regime on a webinar being led by Dr. Ricardo Rosa. Many years ago, it was a TED Talk that Ricardo had done that made me realize that as an educator, my actions needed to speak louder than words. And his work and Dr. Patina's work led me to becoming a conscientious objector. And once we pass question 2 on November 5th, I cannot wait to begin the work on November 6th around a community schools campaign that understands that schools involve the community and all of the wraparound services and the resources that provide equity to all learners. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And now I will bring on our first moderator, Melissa Verdier, who is the president of the Worcester Educational Association. And Melissa has been the president of the EAW since July 2022. She was a longtime special educator at Worcester's North High School, and she began her career as a para-educator while working on her master's degree in special education. Melissa, are you on?
Yes, thank you, Ricardo, and thank you for having me today. I have the pleasure today of introducing Olga Lopez. Olga is a family engagement specialist at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, also known as DESE, with over 25 years of experience in education. Originally from Columbia, she spent 12 years in the educational system there, and then 13 years in the Boston Public Schools. Olga's also worked at the Federation for Children with Special Needs, where she supported and educated Latino families to advocate for their children. Currently, she helps school districts and families collaborate to create systematic change that ensures all students can thrive. Olga holds a master's degree in education from Cambridge College, bravo, and she has completed her leadership programs in neurodevelopment and related disabilities, also known as LEND, from UMass Medical School, and educational policy from the Rennie Center. Welcome, Olga. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Good afternoon. Please let me know if you can hear me well. Oh, yes. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm glad to be here with Dr. Noguera and Dr. Billy for the family engagement and what we are doing in our school business. So I just want to know all the family engagement initiatives are anchored in our educational vision. And this is the part of the work that we want to share with you, all the initiatives that we are moving forward to support our families and our students. So in our educational vision, students and the families have a sense of belonging, and we want all families,
I'm sorry, Olga. It's just a little muffled, so if you could just
I don't know what to do, to be honest with you. Can you hear me better?
a little bit now, yes.
Okay, so they acknowledge all the students and families have a sense of belonging. They are not respected and valued for who they are and what they bring to a school community, including their unique identities, strengths, interests, needs, languages, exceptionalities, and backgrounds. And having this in mind, DESE for the last maybe 5 years has been implementing different family engagement initiatives to work together with families and school districts. And I have some slides. I'm not gonna give it to you, but I would like to share with Ricardo to share with you all. But because just to highlight three of the big initiatives that we are moving forward. One of those is La Respuesta, the answer. We are working with Equity Imperative, and this is an initiative that enhances the partnership between schools, students, and families. We have our first cohort of 7 school districts who implementing La Respuesta, and the goal of this initiative is to create a pathway where families are getting more involved, more vocal in the kids' school, and we are continuing supporting the technical assistance, the families and the school district needs to continue this engaging. And the other initiative that we are moving forward, and I'm so happy that Dr. Monares is here, is the Family Institute for Student Success. We are moving forward our second cohort, and Worcester is one of these part of this cohort. This is a capacity building initiative that aims to strengthen family, school, and community partnership. Our first cohort, we have 46 parents or family members who participate in this initiative at the Freshman High School Academy in Lowell. And the last initiative that we are moving forward is our Better Together Family Engagement Summit. This will be the 3rd year when we are creating an event focused on families and how better partnership with our families. We build a relationship between families and school districts in order to provide all the services the students need and the family to be successful. Last year, we hosted our Family Engagement Summit. We had 700 participants and 350 they were families. And our goal for the summit, that will be maybe have around 1,000 participants. Our goal is to bring 500 families to this event when they can hear about the different initiatives that we have available for them to support and also all the resources. So happy to share this slide with Ricardo and
Thank you,
be
Olga.
with you all. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. Much appreciated. If you have a link that you'd like to share, by all means, you can put it in the chat. Okay. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rachel Monares, who will be introducing Dr. Pedro Noguera. Dr. Monares believes in the possibility of every child, and this approach guides her daily interactions as superintendent of the Worcester Public Schools. Now in her third decade working in education, Dr. Monares holds a vast knowledge base for academic excellence, professional development, and collaborative practices. Rachel has served as a teacher, school principal, director of English learner programs and special education, assistant superintendent, and deputy superintendent. As a social justice champion, she works collaboratively with all stakeholders to foster a culture of equity, academic excellence, and high expectations for all learners. Dr. Monares.
Thank you, Ricardo. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our speaker for this evening, Pedro Noguera. He is one of the nation's leading scholars on issues related to race, inequality, and education. Prior to coming to USC to serve as the Emory Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Dean of the Rossier School of Education, he served as the Professor of Education and holder of endowment chairs at UCLA, NYU, Harvard University, and the University of California, Berkeley. He's the author of 15 books. His most recent book is Search for Common Ground, Conversations about the Tough Questions and Complex Issues Confronting K-12 Education in the United States Today, with Rick Hess, was the winner of the American Association of Publishers Prose Award in 2021. From 2009 to 2012, Noguera served as the trustee for the State University of New York as an appointee of the governor. He has served as an advisor to the governor in New Mexico on education policy and worked as an advisor to the state departments of education in Washington, Oregon, New York, and Rhode Island, as well as several large urban school districts throughout the country. In 2022, he was appointed to President Biden's National Commission on Hispanics, and he was asked to serve as the co-chair of the state of California's Black Student Achievement Task Force by the state superintendent. In 2014, he was elected to the National Academy of Education and Phi Delta Kappa Honor Society. And in 2020, Dr. Noguera was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Noguera has received 7 honorary doctorates from American universities and received awards from the Center for the Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and from the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research at NYU for his research and advocacy efforts aiming at fighting poverty. In 2023, he was ranked first in the nation for influence and impact in the field of education by Education Week. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Noguera.
Thank you, Dr. Monares, and thank you to the Massachusetts Teachers Association for inviting me. It's an honor to be with you today and to have a chance to speak to you about the important issues facing our schools, facing our country. I'm going to share my screen so that I can share my slides. And I want to start though, because I can't resist. I was hearing you talk about question 2, and I lived in Massachusetts. I was there, in fact, when the MCAS was adopted by the state legislature. And I was invited in 2001 to debate an attorney before the state legislature about high stakes testing and whether or not it made sense for the state to adopt MCAS. And we went back and forth. And at one point during the debate, I said, there is not a single public official in Massachusetts who can guarantee that the students who failed the exam had actually been prepared. I want you to think about that and what it means to be prepared all the way through your education. The lawyer debating me said, well, you might be right, but we're going to do it anyway. And they did. And everyone from the Boston Globe declared victory, even though 6,000 students failed. And as you know, if you fail, what is it? I think 3 times, you're not allowed to, you can't get a diploma. It only makes sense if you know who those kids were. 1/3 was special needs kids, the other third, English learners, the other third from districts that we knew were struggling. So I'm glad to see this issue is back on the agenda. My hope is that the state, and Massachusetts is often hailed as the top performing state in the country, will do a better job than it's done so far at supporting kids in need. So I want to talk about that today, and particularly the role teachers play in addressing those needs. I want to start by asking all of you, particularly the teachers that are out there, a real fundamental question. Why are you in this field? And whether or not you have a sense of your own power and ability to make a difference for every student. I ask that because I think if we're not clear about why we're doing it, it's very easy to get discouraged, and in some cases to end up blaming kids or their families when we don't see progress being made. So I start there because we are in a very difficult time in this country. And that's not just about the election. I'm talking about the issues at stake in our society: rising poverty rates, growing inequality between the rich and the poor, homelessness on our streets, mental health challenges, substance abuse. I can go on, climate change, and it is overwhelming. And it's not surprising that so many young people today are experiencing mental health challenges related to depression and anxiety as they think about the world they're going to inherit. Education has to be a resource for helping kids to be ready for that world. And so the responsibility we take on as educators is critical now. And so I want to talk about what it means to do this work well. I want to add to you heard about my academic degrees and my awards. What you should know is I am from a family of immigrants, both my parents from the Caribbean, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, in the housing projects, the part of Brooklyn that still hasn't gentrified. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. Neither went to college. They managed to send all 6 of us to the top colleges in the country. What you should know, though, is that when my family left Brooklyn to move to Long Island, my brother and I were placed in special education. And we were placed there because they saw our names. They assumed that we could not speak English, even though we could. And to them, not speaking English was a disability. So they placed us in special ed. I was only 6 at the time, so I did not mind playing all day. My older brother, Felipe, knew something was wrong and went back to my parents and said they've got us in the wrong classes. My parents did what most immigrant parents do, which is to tell him, listen to the teacher, behave yourself, because immigrant parents tend to trust the schools. Eventually, after repeatedly telling my parents that we were in the wrong classes, my father came to school and insisted that we be switched. And they said, before we can switch their classes, we need to test them. He said, well, test them. Well, that day they tested us, and we went from being special ed students to gifted students according to their test. And because of the change in placement, we were set on a different trajectory. My older brother, Felipe, ended up going to Harvard University. I ended up going to Brown University. My question to you is, what would have happened if my father had not intervened? What happens when parents or teachers don't intervene when they see kids are not being given the education they need and deserve? We can't leave this up to chance. I want to encourage you to think about, what are you doing now as an educator to ensure that all kids get the opportunity to learn? This is the work I've committed myself to. It's work I've had a chance to do throughout the country and increasingly throughout the world. I believe that education can be critical to creating a better future for ourselves. So I know, though, from the research I've done myself, that more often than not, education reproduces inequality. Kids who start poor usually are the ones who end up with the worst outcomes. It's the reasons why districts like Springfield and Lawrence and Boston are still struggling. And this is not new, because where you concentrate poverty and you concentrate needs, and you don't provide the resources to address those needs, you increase the likelihood that inequality and poverty will be reproduced. The question now is, what role can teachers play in countering that tendency? And I want to acknowledge that I think we put too much emphasis on teachers, because teachers can't do it all. Teachers can't help a child who's hungry or get eyeglasses to a child who can't read because they need eyeglasses. But teachers can do a lot. And if we underestimate that, I think then we are missing a vital point about teachers. This quote from Rita Pearson, an educator, that every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best they can possibly be. Every child. I'll bet if I were to ask you, those of you who are listening today, how many of you had an educator at some point in your career who got you to believe in yourself, who got you to believe that you could do something that you previously thought you were no good at, and as a result, turned around your education? I had several in the course of my education. In 8th grade, it was Mrs. Harris. In math, algebra. I was fine in math until algebra. She told us, I'm a great teacher. And she said, that means I can teach all kinds of kids, not just the kids who come in motivated with lots of support at home. She then asked, how many of you struggle in math? And reluctantly, I raised my hand. She said, I want you kids up front, because I'm going to be checking on you all the time. Ms. Harris believed there had to be evidence of learning. And she wanted to see that we were with her, see that we understood. Because you knew if that we didn't understand in September, we certainly wouldn't understand come June. Ms. Harris told us that there was no such thing as a dumb question. So she created a safe environment for asking questions. And I often thought the secret to her success was that she wore a lot of perfume, because I hated the smell of perfume. And if you didn't pay attention, she'd smother you and you'd be smelling just like her. I'm sure that many of you have had a teacher like Ms. Harris in your career. Teachers who stimulated you, who challenged you, who pushed you, but who also supported you and got you to believe in yourself. Teachers who employed art and skill in their teaching, because teaching is intellectual work and there are critical skills we need, but it is also an art. And to the degree that we see teaching as creative work, that'll allow us to engage and build relationships with all kinds of students. To be effective, teachers have to have that belief in themselves. They have to have strong command of content. They have to have the pedagogical skills to reach a variety of learners. And they have to have cultural competence so the kids can relate to them. This is why not everyone can be a teacher. And I think that we should acknowledge that it takes a special kind of person to be a teacher. Great teachers focus on the evidence of learning. I often say that great teaching is like great cooking. How do you know someone's a great cook? Because it tastes good. The people who eat will tell you. And similarly, if you're a great teacher, the students will tell you. They'll let you know, because you've made the expectations clear. You're modeling the students to what good work looks like. You're giving them numerous opportunities to revise and resubmit their work, because you don't do your best work on the first draft. You're checking with them and asking them, do they understand? You're focused on motivating them and inviting them in to learn. And you're working with your colleagues to analyze student work together, because teacher isolation is one of the biggest obstacles to improving the quality of our teaching. So I want you to ask yourself, how many of these things do I do in my classroom? How much is teaching and art for me that I'm honing and developing with time. Great teachers also develop the higher order thinking of our students. That's why test preparation is such a problem, because we want our students to be able to analyze, to problem solve, to apply what they're learning so they can solve big problems facing our country and the world. We want them to know how to do research so they can distinguish between fake news and misinformation. We want them to be critical thinkers, to be prepared for college and careers. And we want them to be able to produce high quality work that shows the evidence of what they've learned. Again, I want you to think about, are we doing this? Too often, teachers, particularly at the secondary level, rely on lecture, focus largely on covering material. Teaching and talking are not the same. Right? When we teach with a focus on evidence of learning, we are more interactive, we are more engaged, we are calling on our students to demonstrate what they've learned, and ultimately to even teach others, because the real evidence of mastery is, can you show and explain what you've learned to someone else? When we do that, we develop those higher order thinking skills in our kids, which means they're going to be better prepared when they leave us. The biggest obstacle to doing this kind of work is tradition. In Massachusetts, I've been in some of your older schools, the Mather School in Boston, one of the oldest schools in the country. The traditions are deep and strong, but those traditions led us to believe that sitting still and listening was the way kids learn. That's not how kids learn. Kids learn through interaction. Kids learn by asking questions. Kids learn by talking to each other. Kids learn by being deeply engaged, a point I'll come back to in a moment. All you have to do is watch a child when they're learning something new, like a new video game. They don't start out by getting direct instruction. They learn by doing, they learn by asking, and they learn through mastery. That's how they get to advance. When we put all that together, classrooms look a lot different. This is why we have to have a clear understanding of what we mean by equity and cannot allow it to become nothing more than a good slogan. No Child Behind was a great slogan, but we left lots of kids behind. So many people understand that equity is about meeting the needs, meeting kids where they are, and acknowledging that many kids come to us with different needs. So the slide on the right shows you the difference when we try to meet the needs. What we often don't realize is that many of those kids, particularly think about those suburban communities outside of Boston, off of Route 2, where kids have everything. No wonder they're scoring such high marks on the MCAS or going off to top colleges, because they come from high-income families with lots of education. They have lots invested in them. Who's doing the same for the kids in Lawrence or the kids in Brockton and Fall River? We know that there's talent in those communities as well. And that's why, to get that talent, we've got to eliminate the barriers. What's getting in the way? What's getting in the way of learning? What's preventing our kids from thriving when they're with us? So to eliminate the barriers, we have to make sure we are giving kids what they need to be successful. That means not just academically, but it also means those social needs, which is why community schools are so important. Some kids need an extra meal because they haven't gotten one. Some kids need a mentor because they don't have that kind of support at home. What do your children need to have that opportunity to learn? We also have to acknowledge that not all kids learn in the same ways. That's true even in the same family. Anybody with more than one child at home knows this. I have 5 children. That's why I'm an expert on equity. They're all different. Different temperament, different personalities, different strengths. This is why an equity focus is challenging, because knowing your students and meeting their needs is not easy when you have lots of kids. So what are the typical barriers that get in the way? I would start with complacency and blaming kids, or the simple fact that as a teacher, we have not given you the skills you need. You know, teaching is one of the few fields where we will take the least experienced people and assign them to the most challenging kids. We don't do that in other professions like medicine or anything else. But in education, we keep doing it. And then wonder why the kids aren't learning and why the teacher doesn't want to be a teacher anymore after a short period of time. So we've got to make sure that we are eliminating the barriers. What's getting in the way of kids performing at a higher level? And I'm going to give you an example soon of a school in Boston that figured this out. It can't be about lowering the standards. It is about making the standards accessible, though. It can't be about treating all kids the same, but we do have to be fair, right, in the way we treat children. It's not just an issue for kids of color. There are lots of low-income white kids who are also struggling across Massachusetts. And it's not about choosing which kids to serve, because we've got to serve them all. So I want to acknowledge this is hard. But if we don't do this work with clarity about what our priority should be, we run the risk of kids who start out not wanting to read, deciding I'm no good at reading, or deciding, like millions of Americans, that they hate math very early. No reading, no math. After a while, school sucks. I don't want to be there. Why would you want to be in a place where all you experience is failure? And before you know it, you're out of school and often out of work, structurally disenfranchised. We have millions of Americans across the country today who are neither working nor in school. They are dependent on their families, their communities, the society we live in. Education can disrupt this pattern if we intervene early. Now, it's not to say that we can't intervene later, because sometimes you have to, we can never give up. But it would certainly help and be far more effective if we got to the kids early. So it starts by knowing your students. Who are your students? And that doesn't mean what are their test scores, or what language do they speak, or what race are they. Who are your students? What do they care about? What do they believe in? What are they interested in? What are their dreams? What are their hopes? The more we know about the students we serve, the more we'll know about how to serve them. The more likely we are to build a strong, trusting relationship with them. And let's always remember, kids learn through relationships. How many of you have seen kids that will work for one teacher, but the same student with another teacher is not working? Some of us have all seen that, haven't we? And usually the missing ingredient is the relationship. So how do we build strong, positive relationships? Well, take a look at this classroom. This is a 8th grade classroom in Los Angeles. All these kids, recent immigrants, many undocumented, all English learners, and they're in an algebra class. 90 minutes long, and they're up out of their seats. There's noise in the room because they're working, they're talking. And the teacher's so good, she could stand in the back and talk to me. She doesn't have to hover because the kids know exactly what's expected. And because they're learning like this, they're not just learning math. They're learning how to collaborate. They're learning how to work together. They're learning how to disagree and use evidence to support their arguments. All vital social skills. And because she teaches like this, she gets to differentiate support. She gets to move among them to see who's got it, who needs more help, which kids could help each other. She's the facilitator of learning. She's made the learning visible because the students are deeply engaged. She told me, she said, this is the best form of classroom management I've ever come up with. I said, why? She said, because look, they're totally engaged. Kids will actually hold each other accountable when they're not paying attention or not doing their work. It's made her job easier. Here's my challenge to you who are listening. Do you believe your kids could do this? Because in a lot of schools, the only kids who get to learn like this are the ones we think are high achievers. Here's the thing we all need to know. This is actually how kids learn. They learn through interaction. How many of you have taught middle school? I taught middle school. And when I taught middle school, you know the first thing I learned? You've got to make learning fun. You got to make it enjoyable, interesting. Otherwise, they'll make it fun at your expense. And then you'll have a lot of headaches. So we focus on engagement because engagement is the path to achievement. This is the thing that the policymakers don't understand. They want higher achievement. They have no clue of what it takes to get there. Engagement is multidimensional. It's behavioral. Are the kids on task? Are they doing their work? Are they present, showing up? Do they seek help? It is cognitive. Do they understand what they're doing? Are they making connections between what they do today and what they did yesterday or what they're going to do next? Can they process the information correctly? Do they understand it? And engagement is emotional. Do they actually care about what they're learning? Are they trying? Are they putting in their best effort? When you bring all three of these forms together, powerful learning occurs in our classroom. This is the work we've got to do if we want to change outcomes for our kids. We've got to get our kids engaged. The good news is that if we focus on getting our kids, getting to know our kids, building a sense of community in the classroom, then it becomes easier to get them engaged. Now, I want to acknowledge again that there are obstacles out there, like poverty, huge obstacle. But when we're in schools that are intentional about mitigating and compensating for the effects of poverty, then we do things like we start homework in the classroom. Why? Because there's often no one to help them at home. How many of you ever try to help your kids at home with homework and you don't understand it yourself and you're tired? Well, many of our students have no one to help them, may not even have a place to do it. So we start in the classroom. I'm not going to say don't give homework. We need to reinforce the learning, but we need to make sure they fully understand it. We need to use our after-school programs to provide peer support to keep kids on task. We need to intentionally counter the stereotypes that undermine our kids, that lead them to believe that because of their identity, they can't achieve. We need to make sure they have the external support required. And we need to engage their parents. All the research shows that when parents are involved, and I mean the most important involvement is what they're doing with the kids at home, not coming to school to sell cookies. When they get the kids to school on time, get them to bed on time, take the cell phone and video games away to make sure they're getting enough sleep, then our kids are going to get better outcomes. We cannot do this without the parents. And the mistake I often see in many schools is an assumption that the parents don't care. I'll tell you, I've worked with schools all over the world. I very, very rarely meet a parent who doesn't care. Very rarely. So let's talk about the Matterhunt School in Boston, which in 2012 was in the bottom 1% of schools in Massachusetts, the bottom 1%, and was being targeted by the state for closure. But 2017, the superintendent at the time, Tommy Chang, had a radical idea to go to the community to say, what can we do to make this school a school you'd be proud of? Today, it's now called the Toussaint Louverture Dual Language Academy, the only Haitian dual language academy in the country. It has a full range of after-school programs. It is no longer the bottom 1%. In fact, the state's identified as a school on the move in 2024. Listen to this quote from the community schools director. He says, instead of saying that a student just doesn't want to learn, we look for what's blocking students from learning, and we work to remove the obstacles. Remember what I said earlier? Equity work is about removing the obstacles to learning. What is the obstacles for your kids? What's getting in the way? We've also got to focus more on engagement. And the good news is that curiosity is a great way to get kids engaged. Most of us who've spent any time with a 3-year-old knows kids are naturally curious, aren't they? Sure they are. They want to know why. Why do I have to take a bath? Why do I have to eat broccoli? Why is the sky blue? Why do the stars come out at night? That curiosity, if nurtured, can help kids to become independently motivated learners, which is what we should be after. Not passive learners, but kids who seek knowledge themselves. So here's an example of how I've seen this work in school. Visiting a second grade classroom in Baltimore. And they'd been doing a unit around the environment, and the teacher brings in a hermit crab. And she says, this is a hermit crab. What questions do you have about the crab? And the kids are all curious. They want to know, how many eyes does it have? What does it eat? How can you tell if it's a boy or a girl? Where does it live? Oh, it lives in that shell. How did it get the shell? Lots of questions. They're curious. Then she says, okay, now I want you to write a story about the crab and draw a picture. And for the next hour, the kids are working on their story, writing away, totally engaged. And I turned to the teacher. I said, what made you decide to bring the crab in? She said, look at the response. Look at the way these kids are eating it up. I could have brought a picture of a crab, but it wouldn't be the same. She was drawing on her creativity as a teacher to get kids excited about learning. The fact that there were poor Black kids in Baltimore, not an obstacle. What's getting in the way of keeping your kids from achieving? Over and over again, what I've seen throughout this country and throughout the world is the best teachers teach kids the way they learn rather than expecting them to learn the way we teach. Think about the difference between the two. If we're teaching kids the way they learn, then we are developmentally focused on their needs. We are bringing music and the arts into the classroom because that helps to stimulate kids. You know, my friend Howard Gardner used to point out, it was common in every kindergarten classroom in this country for the teacher to have a piano for years and to know how to play it. Why? Because we knew that the music was a foundation for learning. Why are the pianos gone now in most of our schools? It's not because kids don't like music. How many of you know kids who've memorized the lyrics to hundreds of songs? What does that tell you about the capacity to retain information when it's meaningful, when it's useful? So let's draw on what we know. Here's one thing we also know about motivation. These two individuals, Roland Fryer to the right, Jaime Escalante, an educator from Los Angeles to the left. Roland Fryer is a professor of economics at Harvard. A few years ago, he had an idea about how to motivate students in urban areas to succeed. He said, let's pay them. Let's pay them to attend school. Let's pay them for higher test scores. Let's pay them to read books. Not a lot, a little bit, but let's reward them with money. And to my surprise, foundations gave him millions of dollars to run an experiment in many districts across the country. And after 2 years, they came to the conclusion it wasn't working. Now, I told them before, I don't think it's going to work, because it's assuming that the only thing keeping kids from working, from getting better grades, is that they're lazy and you need to offer a little bit of money. I said, that's a flawed theory of motivation. The same day that the New York Times announced that Fryer's experiment had failed was the day Jaime Escalante died. And they announced his death in the same paper. Front page, story side by side. But they didn't, I don't think the editors realized there was a connection. Jaime Escalante had a different theory of motivation. He was an engineer from Bolivia who decided to start teaching math at Garfield High School in Los Angeles. They made the movie about him. If you haven't seen it, Stand Deliver, I recommend it. Still a great education movie because it's a true story. Escalante goes to Garfield and he's asked to teach remedial math because that's all they offer. These are poor kids from the barrio in East LA. And he tells his colleagues, he said, this is a waste of time. It's not preparing kids for anything. He said, these kids should learn calculus. His colleagues tell him, these kids can't do calculus. These are gangbangers and future factory workers. He said, yeah, watch me. So he starts to teach calculus to his students. He requires them to come in on Saturdays, come in during the summer, stay late. They have to work hard. He calls this developing ganas, the desire to learn. But he's not satisfied with just getting to work hard. He also takes them to Boeing and other aeronautical labs so they can see how calculus is used in different fields, because he has to expand the horizons. And then he counters the stereotypes. He says, you children are the descendants of people who built pyramids. Calculus and math is part of your heritage. It's not foreign to you. The first time they took the AP calculus exam, his kids passed, all of them. So they assumed he cheated. So they required the kids to be retested. They retested and passed again. And they did that year after year. Eventually, the researchers came in to study what is Escalante doing, and they came back and said, we don't see anything but math, because they understand how he was developing that love of learning in his students. I met one of his former students. She's an engineer at Boeing, and she and I were judges for a robotics competition here in Los Angeles. She said, everything you hear about Escalante is true. I wouldn't be an engineer today if it wasn't for him. Said he believed in us, he pushed us, and he used to come to my soccer games. I said, he came to your games? He says, yeah, but not to cheer me on. He would stay on the sidelines and tell me, I stink at soccer, go back to math. You're better off in math. And I'm so glad I did. What's your theory of motivation? What do you believe is possible for your students? When Escalante died, there was this great outpouring of former students, many of whom were now professionals. And despite the fact they came from a poor community, education had been their pathway to a better life. That's the power of education. Many of you, I bet, have lived that. My question, how do we keep that dream alive for the next generation of kids? I want to thank you for the time, and I open it up now for questions.
Hi, Dr. Nagaro. Thank you so much for being here today and for just speaking. That was powerful information that I think everybody needs to hear, and we don't hear it enough. So the first question I wanted to pose to you is, many schools claim to be community schools, but when we examine them closely, they're merely in the community and not of the community. So what must be done to make certain that community schools are truly community-based?
That's a great question. And I'll use the Matterhorn School as an example, the one I mentioned earlier. The district didn't just say, we're going to make this a community school. They went to the community and asked, what do you want of a school? What would make this a school that you would be proud of? That's how they came up with the idea of a dual language, dual immersion school in Haitian Creole. They also said, what kind of services do you need? And what kind of programs would be attractive? Because, you know, many schools are on schedules that don't meet the needs of parents. You know, what happens at 3:30 when school lets out? Where do kids go with little kids? You know, and now you have an extended day that meets parents' needs. So you really have to engage parents' community for it to be a community school. It's not just about the services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noguera. Lots to think about. Much appreciate just everything you've shared. So a question for us to consider in Massachusetts is how can policy coalitions effectively advocate for the establishment and sustainability of full service community schools at the local, at the state, and even at the federal level?
Great question. So I would encourage you to think about a coalition that is inclusive of healthcare, inclusive of other stakeholders, nonprofits. Don't just leave it to education, right? There are lots of other constituencies out there who understand that these issues will affect our future. Think about this. The biggest advocates for better schools should be older people. Now, they don't often see it that way because they think that if you pass a bond, it's going to raise taxes. But if this generation of kids don't get a good education and get employed, Social Security is in big trouble. They're not going to be able to retire, right? Because it's this generation of kids that has to work to support the older generation. We're connected. So we need to appeal to the seniors as well, so they're part of that coalition. We need a broad coalition so we cannot be dismissed by policymakers just as special interest.
Dr. Menares, do you want to post that first question in the chat? Or I'll do it. You can do the next one. So the question is, how do we get the city to buy in? Or any particular city of whatever community we're in? How do we get that buy-in? I think that's like a perfect segue, because speaking to the fact that we need to get the older generation involved is definitely really pertinent.
Yeah. You know, I just wrote something about this because I think in a lot of cities, what we see is that the elected officials and the business community, they're more likely to put tax revenue into a new stadium or a new convention center than into schools and parks, things that benefit the community. So you have to kind of change the focus. The only community I really see do this was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I don't know how they came to this, but in Tulsa, it was the mayor and his wife that were leading the community school effort. It included foundations. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but Oklahoma was the first state to adopt preschool for kids across the state, right? And they've been doing it for years. And it was because of these community initiatives. So I think we got to elect people at local office who get it, who understand that, yeah, the health of this community is going to be not just based on whether or not we have a winning team, but whether or not we have winning schools. You know who will tell you this? The real estate agents. They know property values are determined by the quality of the schools. That's how significant it is.
God, I feel like I just keep shaking my head like a bobblehead. We've got another question for you from a classroom teacher. A lot is placed on teachers who often find themselves in a position in which they are overworked and underpaid. Therefore, many teachers take part-time jobs to make a living wage. How can community schools advocate for more equitable teacher pay?
I don't know if that's a role for community schools to play. I do think the union needs to advocate for more pay for teachers and benefits. And I think we need a broad coalition. I think that it's critical because we've got to provide the support to make teaching a profession that people want to be in and will stay in. We can't have a revolving door because, unfortunately, if you stay in teaching 2 or 3 years, chances are you left before you got very good, right? It's a very rare person that gets to be a highly skilled teacher in such a short period of time. So we need to make sure that we are providing the support early. And I think, again, I was glad to hear the union officials early on talk about building this coalition across the state to adopt, what is it, question 2, and some of the other measures on the ballot.
Okay, this one is a little bit longer, so give me a little grace here. A way to engage parents and community members in a way respecting parents' schedules. So public schools with well-equipped kitchens and cafeteria, hosting perhaps by subscription, early dinner meals for the entire family, especially single parent families shared by the parents on their way, a home for daytime jobs, picking up their children. I'm thinking this is more of an answer to the question. My apologies, because I didn't read through it all the way. So I guess the question at the end here is, I like this part, so I'm going to add it. School gardening and campus care and enrichment classes and clubs and sports, volunteer work, study
love all
halls,
that.
and more. Is this happening anywhere?
It is. I can name places where those things are happening. Sad thing is that a lot of times it happens in isolation, and the news about it doesn't get out, and sometimes it happens in spite of the district, not because of the district.
Right.
I was working with a school here in LA where parents worked to develop a garden at the school, and the principal actually tried to stop them, said it was a violation of the school code, and right now that garden is thriving. It's the pride of the school. So I think that you have to figure out how to build a coalition of stakeholders to work together so that we can do this kind of work in more communities. We should not wait until we get a grant from the state. There's a lot we can do to get community engaged and get community support for schools right now, and that's what we should focus on.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm going to take 2 questions together, the one from Rhonda and the one from Jennifer. I think they kind of match each other. So first one is, what are the pillars of community schools? And then can you give us our first 3 steps to get going?
So the pillars of community schools are, first and foremost, there's got to be a strong connection between what happens during the day and after school, before and after, right? It can't just be an add-on. That means that the adults who are working in the community school part need to understand what the teachers and educators are doing. They need to plan together. That way, the activities they come up with for the after school reinforce the work that's going on during school, right? So there's a clear connection between the two. So first, that connection is important. Second, the after school element can't just be more school, right? Kids are tired at the end of the day. If you tell them we're going to give you more classes, they'll run away as fast as they can. We got to feed them, but we also have to, again, work to make learning fun. A great way to teach get kids writing, spoken word, poetry. I've seen it work over and over again. Chess is a great way to get kids engaged. Robotics, do things that appeal to their interests, the arts, as a way to build connection, to make kids want to be there. And then third, we've got to have adults working with kids that can connect with them. And it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be of the same background, but they have to be adults that care about kids, that the kids believe in, that have a sense of moral authority with kids. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So if you can do those things, I think you can build a viable community school.
So then the second part of that is, then what would you say are our first 3 steps? If we've got nothing in place, where would you say we start?
I would say start with meeting with the parents and start talking about what are their dreams, what do they believe, what are their needs, how can we work together to devise strategies to meet those needs. Again, you don't want to reinforce helplessness. Said, we got to do this together, right? It's not just about what the school can do, it's about also what the community can do to support the school. And it's a partnership, and that's what we've got to build. But if it's a real partnership, then we've got to be willing to listen, and we've got to be willing to invite people in. And if you can do that, then I think you're off to a great start. Because, and I would also include the kids in it. Kids will tell you what they're interested in. I know a school here in Inglewood, California, where it was the kids who said they wanted esports. You know, that's a big thing for kids now, esports. They would rather play video games with basketball than play real basketball. You know, there's different kinds of kids today. But if you don't come up with activities that are of interest to the kids, then they're not going to show up. So what's the point?
Thank you.
I have to agree with Dr. Menares that I am like the bobblehead over here, like, yep, with you. So here's a question. There's some fear, like some major fear from top to bottom in school districts that make change hard. So how can we address that fear that keeps people quiet and keeps educational leaders kind of paralyzed?
What, and the fear is of what?
I think so it's not explicit. So I'm going to read this person's mind and say that it probably just around change and just looking at education through a different lens that I don't think that a lot of people are prepared to do. And I have a new message. Is it the same part? No. So that would be my assumption around that. I just think that change can be really hard. And when you mentioned that school previously about how, you know, that oldest school in Boston and how you should be sitting in your seat and listening, I think a lot of people are kind of still stuck in that mindset of school. So I'm assuming that's where we're at with it.
Yeah.
I'll
You know,
add-
go ahead.
I think maybe one more piece to add. Yeah, we don't know exactly what the question asked, but
Yeah.
I think the fear of sharing power from the bottom up. So that's part of that fear. And I would say from the administrative leadership side of it, the fear of also taking on more in a school district when we're still trying to make sure that we're actually educating all children and yet then we're like extending our day and all of that. So I would say it's a combination of sharing power from the bottom up, but also overwhelming the system.
Yeah. So let me put it like this. Our schools were designed to get the results they get now. If you're not satisfied with the results, then you have to look at that system and say, what needs to change to get different results? So ask yourself, how engaged are our students? How often do the kids come to you and say, wow, that was awesome. This was such an inspiring day I had. Learned such cool things. You know, how many of you are in schools right now with chronic absenteeism? You know what we know? You can't make kids come back. However, you can create schools that are so good, kids want to be there. I remember when my son was going to school in Cambridge, they had a dance program. It started at 6:30 a.m. He was dressed at 6 a.m. because he wanted to be there. It was a drill team. He wanted to be part of it, right? He wanted to be on time. So we need to devise strategies that bring kids in, right? And I know there's a lot of fear. Change often evokes fear, but you know, like when I showed you that classroom where the kids were doing math and they were up out of their seats, you know, seeing is believing. Seeing that kids, you can trust kids to engage in learning that way, because a lot of teachers are afraid of that. They're afraid that the kids will be disruptive, that there'll be chaos. But when you see teachers who know how to equip kids with the skills so they can work together and learn together, then you know, no, this can be done. And I've seen it happen in lots of places, including in Massachusetts.
It's my turn, huh? I'm looking. Thank you. Oh, okay. Understanding that this model must begin at the preschool level on up to be most effective. If a school district is about to build a replacement secondary or high school was about to be built, what would you recommend it provide from the inception?
So, I've had a chance to see, Boston had, I think they still have them, pilot schools at one point. And pilot schools were envisioned as a kind of to encourage out of the box thinking. My friend Debbie Meyer created the Mission Hill pilot school in Boston several years ago. And some of you may know Boston School of the Arts and Fenway. These are all public schools, right? But the idea was to give the schools the freedom that many charters have to do things differently. And they did. And the Boston School of the Arts uses arts as a way to get kids connected. Fenway uses experiential learning. These models do work. And what they have in common is they have a clear, coherent vision of what they're trying to do. That gives every member of the school community, from the teachers, the administration, to the support staff, clarity about where they're going and how they're doing things. When that happens, the school is in a much better position to serve its students because every member of the staff is on the same page. This is what we're trying to do. And when you bring about that collective vision, it has to be a shared vision, not the principal's vision, but a shared vision, then great things are possible.
So a question just got added. So Rachel, just so you know, I'm skipping over one, but I feel like this is an important one for me to ask. So what has the role of the union looked like in supporting community schools?
Well, many of the unions, AFT and NEA, are very supportive of community schools. And in fact, you can check out their websites. I actually serve on the board of the NEA Foundation and also of the Shanker Institute with the AFT. And both organizations have been big proponents of community schools. But the real work doesn't happen in Washington, it happens locally, right? And that's where we need to make sure that teachers and the unions understand how this kind of work can actually make the job of a teacher easier, right? When there's an after-school program at a school, then teacher can know there's a place where kids can get help with homework, a place where kids can get support in reading or whatever it is. If there's a great before-school program, so many kids are coming late because of the fact that they have to drop siblings off before school. So it's again about community engagement, but it's also about getting the union to understand why this is important. And so the union has to embrace a broader vision as well.
I'm just going to jump up in real quick with this follow-up. And in your experience, how do they bargain that? How do they bargain for that?
I think what I'm seeing here in Los Angeles, where there was a teacher strike about 4 or 5 years ago, it was one of the bargaining platforms. It wasn't just about wages. They said they want community schools because they're seeing the needs of the kids. They're on the front lines. They know they're serving kids who are homeless, kids who haven't eaten, kids who have basic needs that haven't been met. So they have become the advocates for their children. And I'm seeing that in other districts around the country right now as well.
I think we know this question, or the response, but we'll make sure. Does this have to be a public school for a community school?
It doesn't have to be. There are charter schools that have embraced this as well. And there are I don't know of many private schools that have done it, but in fact, one of the advantages I was just in New York City that charter schools often have over traditional public schools is they have the extended day, and parents want that. But think about it. If you're a parent who's working, you want to make sure your child is in a safe place until you can pick them up. Mm-hmm. And so this community school model, it actually meets parents where they are, and we should not allow that to be an advantage that charters have over traditional public schools.
I'm not 100% what this question is referring to. So if you want to elaborate, question asker, but what are the grades? I don't know if they mean, I would assume they mean is it pre-K to 12 in most places, or?
Most community schools are elementary, some middle, but they need to be, again, developmentally appropriate. If you're going to do a community school model at a middle or a high school, then you need activities that appeal to kids, because as we know, then you're dealing with kids who have the ability to just go off on their own. And so what can you do that'll make them want to be present? What kind of services can you provide that'll make kids want to be involved? So for example, school here, they have a whole focus on career and technical education, internships after school. So kids have a way into good paying jobs when they graduate. So you really do have to understand what are the needs of kids, and what will appeal to their interests.
Hey, I think we're coming to the end. We want to thank you. I see responses or just kind of information. I don't see questions. Did I miss any, Melissa? I think we're good.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think,
one just came in. One
oh,
just-
one coming.
We'll make this our last question.
All
Thank you.
right.
Can you speak about community schools that not only serve the students, but the overall family?
Yeah, a number of schools, particularly during the pandemic, took this on. Schools became places where the community could get food, where the community could get internet service. And there are several schools that have embraced this role. Now it depends. Not everybody does, because then you still have to make sure that the site is, conducive to teaching and learning, that teachers don't come in and their classrooms are in disarray. But there are schools that have embraced this, where there's food pantry and other services available to the community. And again, what this does is build that partnership that we want. We want the community to feel a sense of ownership with their schools, because then they will give and support their schools.
So, so I'm going to follow up and just make sure. So like someone just put in anything to share about university assisted community schools. I would think that you would say, start with the local community and how the university could support what the local community is saying that they want. Then that's how you make that connection, right? And you further augment.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Just to piggyback that really quick, at our local president's meeting over the weekend, Ricardo shared a really great video. And I'm not to put you on the spot, Ricardo, I apologize, but if perhaps that could be shared out, that would be excellent. It was great. And it did show the collaboration between a university and a public school in the same area. I think it was Maryland, but I could be wrong.
That's awesome. Well, we want to thank you, Dr. Noguera, for sharing your talents, sharing your time, being a role model for all of us for so many years. I know I took a slew of notes, and Melissa and I are in the same district, so we're trying to get some things happening here in Worcester. So we're very much appreciative of it. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Melissa, for the final closing.
Yes, thank you very
I
much.
just reinforce that someone put in a comment, retired teachers can be a source of support. And I agree wholeheartedly. And they, a lot of them are highly skilled and could help out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all. It was great being with you today, and I wish you all
Yeah.
the best. I'm going to take off and
Thank you.
appreciate you, Ricardo, for inviting me, and thank you all, Massachusetts Teachers Association.
Thank you. Sorry, my son's in the background clapping for you. I just wanted to mention MTA is launching a book club and full service community schools throughout the state, where there will be a flyer that's in English, Spanish, and Cape Verdean Creole on the chat. The book is The Community Schools Revolution, Building Partnerships, Transforming Lives, and Advancing Democracy. And it has about 5 authors. So I'm going to leave that to you to find. I quickly typed it in and it was easy to find on Amazon. So please look into that. But the first meeting is a statewide virtual meeting, and it will occur on Tuesday, November 12th from 5 to 6. 2 other meetings will occur in person in one of the 4 cities. So Worcester, Brockton, Springfield, and Fall River are all going to be holding these. You do need to register for one of the book clubs to get the first statewide Zoom link, and the registration link is in the chat as well. I definitely encourage you to get involved in this book club. The book itself looks fantastic. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And I think we are on the trend for the future. So I personally want to thank everybody for coming out today. I appreciate it.